Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I am John Clark.
And I'm Joe Barnhart, and we want you to know if you do or do not believe in God, either one, you should not be alone. And this is a program for everyone who wants to have a good, rational, open discussion, free thought discussion on very important topics. And we want to welcome you to be with us.
Today's show topic, we're tackling abortion. But first, let me tell you a little bit about our sponsors. The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's will be at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30. Just look for the silver jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. If you want to come down and just have any sort of old rational talk, as Joe just mentioned, feel free. Just don't come down to proselytize or to instigate.
Okay, and the Rationalists of East Tennessee also sponsor our program, and they have several regular monthly meetings, like the first and third Sunday mornings of the month are usually lectures with lively discussions, just open discussions, and the second Sunday is a book club meeting with discussion. The fourth Sunday is just a usual get-together for reflection, and it usually has potluck.
Later on the show, we'll give you some information about our websites and whatnot about halfway through, including times and locations. I think we're going to shoot, well, let's go to In the News. But right before that, I just want to mention that we talked about having a speaker at Rationalist. I'm drawing a blank now on his name. Price, yeah, Robert Price, right? Yeah, and that was the annual Rationalists of East Tennessee lecture, and it was excellent. That was this past, so you've missed it already, but I just want to mention that that's an excellent service that the Rationalists of East Tennessee provide, and it was pretty much a full house this year. Oh, yeah. And about this time next year, we'll have another one in, and you know, please pay attention to when we schedule that and maybe get in on that one. Let's move on to this. We had one segment here about a Sudanese woman who she's married. She's married to a Christian man, right? And they have a child together, and the child, according to the state, is considered a Muslim. And so apparently,
well, let's see. She, I think. I can't remember the details of it. I think she had been, maybe the Muslim man died, but we'll have to look that up. The main thing is she's
accused of apostasy.
She married a Christian man.
Yes.
And now they want to put her in shackles in jail.
Well, she's in prison.
And that's a capital offense. It's called apostasy.
Right. And they said, let's see. He is not, so he's fled to the U.S., but he is not permitted to have custody of son because the boy is considered Muslim, right? Which is a very interesting thing to say about an infant.
That's the male ego.
Yeah. I mean,
that part of the country just as early in our part of the country, the male ego was a big factor for making laws.
Oh, right. Well, and I do want to point out one thing. We mentioned The God Delusion here as a book that we for our atheist counterpart meetup, and you know, Dawkins has been quoted as saying we shouldn't put these labels on the children. This is one thing that I agree a great deal with him, and I think this is one of those universal kind of ideas. How can a child be Muslim, or how can a child be a capitalist, or a how can a child have these qualities? You can't.
Well, you know, interesting enough is in the Baptist tradition, they did away with infant baptism because it said that you have to have a person deciding about his or her religion and then baptize or not if they don't want.
And a child hasn't quite gotten there yet. We're going to talk about this later on in what you'd refer to me as the social womb.
The social womb.
In that you can have a child that's born, child's out of the actual womb. However,
It still has to have a social womb. Yeah.
Incredibly, in the case of humans, incredibly dependent.
Any mother or father who does the job right knows it takes a lot of nurturing.
Yeah.
So, but we'll get into this.
Yeah. Let's. That's the only news bit I had, though, and it's just a sad state to have
sad, yeah.
and to have this happening just because you got two different people, or well, apparently two people that have enough in common to get married and have a child together, but yet they can't be respected to be together under their own state.
That's a sad thing about a religion that can't keep itself going without committing murder.
Yes.
You know, in other words, the whole notion of apostasy and in murder as a way of controlling it says a lot about the insecurity of their beliefs.
Right.
And whether it's Christian, and there are traditions in which you had Christians who committed murder for heresy.
Yeah, we've that's another good topic for other shows. But Christians. At least in, well, Christians, Muslims, just about everybody in America has this very moderate stance. They know that these things are not applicable to these times.
And religious liberty.
And apparently in this portion of the world, not quite the same.
Not the same, right.
But so the topic today is abortion. And I want to remind folks at home, while I shimmy some stuff around here on the table, that we all know that when we bring this topic up,
it's a highly controversial topic.
we elicit knee-jerk reactions. It's difficult sometimes to stay on point. And one thing we wanted to start off with today, keeping in line with what we've been doing on the show lately, is try to convey an honest understanding of the opposition. Right?
Yeah.
Well, I say the opposition. Even with our own groups, we have different opinions on this.
Sure, we do.
And
difference of opinion. Yeah.
We want to start off. Dr. Price, when he was in, had made a very short comment and didn't digress on it at all.
No.
But the comment was that he felt he had some conservative opinions on abortion.
But all he said is he thought that abortion was second-degree murder.
Right, or at least, or some variation of it. Yeah. And so, and he associated this with a conservative view. And so we'd like to try our best right now to give that view, I guess. So when... I used to have this view myself, and I want to say that when it came to a child or a human in the womb, right?
A human in the womb, yeah.
When I had this perspective, and when I've talked to people who still have it, their perspective is that is a person, that is a life. I want to say that a sacred is a good way to look at it. This is a sacred life, and so. It kind of paints you in a corner in a lot of ways that you think from that point on.
What I like about this approach is we need to talk about the sanctity, if you like, in other words, the respect for human life.
Exactly.
And then the question is, well, of course, our gums have DNA. If you brush your teeth, you're going to lose some life.
Yeah, you got 300 different species of bacteria. Yeah. We're just going to...
And I'm losing some life, I hope, when I lose weight.
Yeah.
So we've got to talk about degrees of life and kinds of life.
Right. Oh,
so, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, because we talked about it before starting the show, for those of you at home, another thing that I thought might be useful for this conversation is to think none of... All these people in varying positions on abortion, none of them want to harm other people.
Yeah,
I don't. I think that. I mean,
there are
a fraction of people are going to be a little weird. You know, they drown their children or something. We're not talking about that.
That's not what
we're talking about. By and large, most people, conservative, whatever. Religious or not, all of it.
Yeah.
They're not trying. I do not think that it is helpful to this conversation to look at them as trying to harm other people or life.
Yeah, and I don't want to take the...
And so we want to stay away from that. Yeah.
And I'm with you on that. And you don't want to think the person who disagrees with you is an idiot. That's wrong, too.
Right. It's certainly not the case.
I think what we're both saying, you have people on at least two sides of this issue.
Two strong political ones, certainly, at least.
I'm even before political, it's more moral.
Yeah, moral issues.
That these are good people on both sides,
right,
who are honestly trying to show respect for human beings.
Yeah.
Both the fetus in the womb and the mother. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I would go so far as to say, if a woman is choosing to give birth to a child, then it's immoral for her not to take good care of that child. To take dope, for example.
And before, to do things that would harm.
Yeah, that's immoral to do that.
And I think. Again, I think most people are going to agree with that. And so we don't want necessarily to brush that idea aside. We want to embrace it for the rest of the conversation. And another portion of this conversation is legal terms and our stance of our government on it. Yeah. We are going to kind of brush that aside in the sense that most people do agree on this, whether conservative or not. Most people also don't want to punish necessarily people for this act. Yeah. They may look at it with some disdain, mm-hmm. and in fact, some of them look at themselves that way. But when it comes to law, we're holding to the innocence of the person. We're trying our best. It's a very difficult decision, and we don't want the law getting in the way of these types of things.
We need to settle this as a moral and a factual question, even before moral, is what are we dealing with inside the womb?
Right.
I mean, that's a factual question.
So now that we've set aside to a degree this legal portion, and we embrace that we're all just trying to figure this out and trying to do so honestly and without harming people, we find that something comes up regarding the status of a fetus, child, human. This is Is it a person or not?
Okay,
is it this seems to be one of the central difficulties.
It's a central issue, and I think we can calmly deal with it. And a very good book, by the way, that I want to recommend is called "The Patient in the Womb" by Peter Volpe, Volpe, published by Mercer University, which is connected, by the way, with the Baptist University, and. We're going to deal with this to try to show that you have caring, honest people on various sides of this issue. And I want to say on various sides because I talked to a woman recently who was a nurse, and she and I differed on some things, and it turned out we were on the same thing about 85%.
All right.
So, and we had a lot of respect for each other, and I can learn from her.
Well, before we get to that, we do have a phone call,
let's go.
and we're going to see if it doesn't derail us right away.
Okay, we want to get on the topic. Go
Hello,
ahead.
Caller. Could we have a name or nickname for you?
Yeah, it's Charles from Central Illinois.
Hello, Charles.
Hey, Charles.
Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, on today's topic, there's been a lot of debate around both the atheist community and so forth on this subject, and one of the things that people point out is that Jesus himself never once dealt with abortion.
Yeah, that doesn't even come up.
It never shows up, just like homosexuality.
And you had a lot of abortions going on in the time of Jesus. In the Roman Empire, you had lots of abortions going on, for sure. Yeah. But you're right, it did not come up in the New Testament, at least in the teachings of Jesus that I know of.
Right, and the traditional, for Jewish idea was that the woman's pregnancy wasn't viable until like after 90 days or something like that.
Okay, we're going to get into the issue of viability, because I'm glad you brought that up.
Right.
I'm going to write that word.
Yeah, that's a reminder, because I think I'd already forgotten about it too.
I'm glad you brought that. And you have but okay, let's get back to this, because let us get into this, Charles, and then call us back, because we need to develop this. But stay with us, will you?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I think we've maybe made our point that this is not good people versus evil people. We're talking about issues. In fact, I know atheists who differ among themselves.
Oh, yeah.
I know Catholics who differ among themselves. I subscribe to a Baptist journal and other Christian journals, and they differ among themselves, and that's understandable because this is a very difficult
and these things come on common ground too. The viability, as Charles just pointed out, and that's different not just in time, but in geographic location. Third world countries right now.
Oh yeah.
I mean, let's talk about this in two fronts there. The survivability of a community, right? There's a biological survivability of the mother to have nurtured the child in the womb and provided for it, and now we're going to go ahead and have the pregnancy. That only saves the woman by and large. I mean, that is what that's there for. And now we can rely on the community rather than just the mother. So she is still, now she has less risk to her health and whatnot. And now the community it becomes, now keep in mind, people, we're not talking about here necessarily. I'm talking, the context is a third world community that may have to make very difficult decisions on someone else's child.
Well, we have in this country,
which in their case is their child. It's their community's child. And
what we have in Tennessee called 10 care.
Oh, right, yes.
In which, if the husband, for example, disappears, forget to work for a living, you still got the child to take care of. And 10 care, as long as our governor doesn't wipe it out,
which is
a way of trying to help the mother. And in 10 care, the mother is supposed to do some work.
Yeah.
And earn some living, and plus give subsistence, because they know that it's good for the child to be with the mother rather than in a home somewhere.
Exactly. And in our country, it's nice. It's great enough to be here to where we can pretty much say that the idea is to save all the babies we can, right? Yeah. But just because Charles brought that up, the context of the time period of Jesus, this isn't the same, and you may be in a situation where, like you said, up to 90 days. I mean, I don't know how factual that is on the amount. But it's a perspective of the time.
Well, there's a statement sometimes that there's fetal viability.
There we go. Yeah.
Now let's talk about that for a moment.
So that's a medical term.
Yeah.
When is a fetus capable of surviving outside of the womb when it would otherwise normally?
I've forgotten the exact number of weeks, but some of our
third trimester.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now my point is, and I think yours too, is the statement has been made: the fetus can live outside the womb now,
right?
Alone. By itself.
What's its yearly wages outside of the womb?
I started to say.
Yeah.
Now, we know what the people mean by that.
Right.
If you do not have a social womb in which the baby is fed, is nurtured, and included being held to be close to the baby.
Very important to be held.
Yeah, very
also. We're finding out more and more.
More and more. Yeah. In fact, I remember a Baptist minister friend of mine, great big guy, with his deep voice, and I still remember, I spoke at his funeral, I remember, a very dear friend, but I remember watching him hold his baby and sing Big John. And I remember mentioning that at his funeral. I think I mentioned this on the program once, and the woman walked up to me. She was probably a teenager. She said, "Thank you for helping me to remember again my father."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and here this big guy was.
She was the one. Yeah. But yeah. So this womb, medically, there's a terminology here, and inside the mother's body.
Inside.
But we're not talking about that anymore.
I mean, that's crucial. You wouldn't be here without it.
Exactly.
But it's not sufficient for making a person.
Nature wasn't interested in that. Nature was interested in the survivability of the species. And now that we have a civilization, we can help nature out a bit, and we can help take care of this child. But the problem now is we've taken the responsibility off the back of the mother's womb. You know, it does its job to the point. And we take over. Well, Mom takes over. The civilization provides. And
And we had, well, first of all, the human species had to do this because by standing upright, the passageway is smaller. And so the head comes out not fully formed. It has to grow more outside.
Yeah.
And so that growth takes place only if the nurturing takes place outside the womb. Now, what we're trying to work toward is also a view that becoming a person is not something that happens spontaneously at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right. It's
something that is very slowly developing over weeks and months, and I'd want to say years.
Right. So, a consequence of this thinking, let's go back. We started off attempting to give a good, strong, conservative perspective, and I think a good argument for saying that we shouldn't have abortions.
Yeah.
But one of the premises was that all life is sacred, including the fetus in the womb, and that's rational to me if that premise is there. And so now I guess what we're doing is we are arguing that premise is wrong in a sense. Not 100%, but
what we want to say
have?
is that life has to be in relationship to life.
Right.
In other words, you have a limited number of resources. Let me give you an example. Many women don't know, most women probably know, that there are spontaneous abortions that women have. They don't even know they have.
Well, and men too. They don't have a clue this is going on.
Men.
I want to make a small joke. I want to make a small joke. We are two men talking about abortion, and we both were lacking biological features that some people may think disqualify us to portions of this conversation, and in fact might disqualify us to certain portions.
But if we hadn't talked to women and learned from them, it certainly would disqualify us.
And so, if you're at home and you want to chime in on that, I'd be more than happy to hear a comment.
Well,
right before that, I wanted to also say that I mentioned the legal kind of argument. We're going to shun away from that. And I mentioned just trying to do this honestly. I also want to mention that we're ignoring another argument, and that is that this is happening in a woman's body. And so the argument that since this is happening in her body, and we have rights to our own bodies, that it is a very difficult argument, I think, that the conservative perspective owes, that it does need to address this, and I think it fails to address it, that this is her decision. And so that ties into the legal. So I did jumble that in a legal perspective, but I just want people at home to know that I'm not talking about it. I hope I'm not ignoring it. But what we're debating now is, because you mentioned the resources, now we're actually trying to get into the ethics.
Ethics in the
aside those ethics, because we uphold, I think universally, I shouldn't say universally, but by and large, even people recognize the importance of it being a woman's decision, and certainly when it comes to legal procedures, you do not want to put innocent people in prison, like the poor Sudanese woman we just talked about. Different issue, but
part of it being a person is to have a free choice.
Right. But so let's go back into
okay. Well, what I wanted to
resources.
This is the doctor's point of view.
Okay.
Is that most people don't realize that the rate of spontaneous abortion in pregnant women is very high.
Very high.
1 in every 3 cases of fertilized eggs, 1 in every 3 is aborted involuntarily.
Right.
Yeah, not purposefully.
Well, you know, another thing, a little slight caveat to that is that most abortions performed in this country, for example, I mean, I'd say, I'm just going to throw a number out there, but a high percentage, 90%, 85%, are early abortions. This is not something, this is like 12 weeks or less. This is before the 50% fetal viability, as they call it.
Very small,
And so it seems like in the news they want to tell you that basically what you see in your arms, this infancy, is what's inside of the womb when these abortions are taking place. And so that's some nonsense in the media. But if you don't mind, continue with the.
Well, this writer is going on to say that 16 of 100 of these fertilized eggs will fail to be fertilized.
Right, that's before, yeah.
In other words, you got to go through the zygote, the blastocyst, stage, and the little cells are developing.
Right.
In other words, it takes a long time to develop a fetus, and then it takes a long time after birth to turn it into a person. It's a human being. It's not.
Yes.
It's
not,
no
one's arguing that it's not a human. I don't think.
No, of course. Now, I will argue against what was the Catholic priest view back in the 50s, that contraception was a form of murder. I don't know where these guys were coming from, but I think the Catholic tradition may have moved beyond that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But a sperm cell, many of them, billions die. Billions die around the world.
Indeed.
And and that's life. A sperm cell is life. Yeah. It's a potential person, just as an egg is a potential. We use the word potential because we distinguish it from actual.
But now, were you about to talk about whether or not the sperm is a
form of life.
A form of human
life?
Yeah, it's certainly a human cell. It's 50% of the genetic information required to get to the gamete. But
are you challenging me that it's life?
Well, I was thinking maybe because a joke was made on Comedy Central. I want to say it was the Daily Show. They interviewed a politician and I forget what state it is, but correct me if I'm wrong at home if you can think of this. Tried to say that the egg was tried to legally define that as.
Well, it is life.
Well, no, but the person, because they wanted legislatively to stop the abortions to happen. So they thought they could just go in there and say, "Oh, we're going to apply a legal definition to scientific terms." It's like when they define tomato as a vegetable, right?
Okay.
We're getting off.
Okay, what we're making the distinctions is there degrees and stages in life.
Yes.
Not every form of life is the later form of it. A tadpole is not a frog. Right. An egg is not a chicken. And I'm arguing a fetus is not yet a person. We're the kind of species, it takes a long time for our kind of species to be what it is, namely a person.
Right.
And that doesn't happen in just a matter of months.
Exactly.
I would argue it. Well, I want to argue later on what it does take, but I'm trying to say that we've got to pay attention to these stages and I would argue each stage is life. A woman's egg is not a pebble or a marble. It's life.
And a necessary component.
It's a necessary but not sufficient to be a person.
To be a person, right.
In other words, potential means it will become something if it gets the other ingredients.
Yeah.
Without those other ingredients, it's not the actual. It's still potential. I am a potential multimillionaire.
All right. On that note, I'd just like to really quickly. We're going to go into our mid-program break, but we want to. I want to know if we've been accurate with our conservative perspective, and if you're at home, you've got a. I'm not asking conservative politically. I'm talking about
morally and factually.
Morally and factually, are we accurate regarding your position on why you are bothered or why anyone would be bothered with an abortion? And I'd very much like to know if that's been accurate. If you are at home and you are slanted on what you would call the pro-choice group, have we been insightful in any way to a pro-life argument for you? And I think we'd just go right into our mid-program break if Sam could run that in a second.
Have you got it for us, Sam?
Let's give us a second to recharge.
Okay, we got something.
I trailed off a bit on the biology, but
that's all right. That's good.
We believe in one less God than everyone else.
Let's see. So now I guess we can tackle
Society of Knoxville.
The
is a fun and friendly group of people, just like you, that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
All right, hello, welcome back. If you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program, well, you kind of saw the thing right there, a program about Atheist Society in Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Just want to remind you at home, this is a call-in show. We're talking about abortion, and we've narrowed a wide variety of perspectives to an issue, and that is the status of fetus, infant.
Development.
Not a question of whether or not it is alive or human, but whether it is a person. And we're shunning away from legal arguments. Right. We're staying away from
trying to get the factual
and just trying to get the information accurate and why people would think a certain thing. And then what are we've talked about the implications of having that decision about the fetus, and that's what we can go
see. I did my first paper on this in 1955. I've been working on it for a long time. When were you born?
81.
Okay.
81.
Now,
the year Jimi Hendrix died, right? Or no, that was 79.
Here's what I'm trying to get at, is that it takes time for what we call personhood. We're the kind of species, we're all born in some respects prematurely because the head could not get through if it were fully developed. So it has to be born not smaller than it's going to be. It's going to double outside, and that means it's got a lot of... In other words, if the child's brain does not grow and develop outside the womb, it'll never crawl.
Right.
Now, most animals, like take a calf, we talked about this once before, a calf can walk immediately, just a matter of minutes.
Just right outside. And in fact, some species, I can't think of any right off the top of my head, but right outside the womb, they're ready to go. They can fight, defend themselves.
Well, the calf can. But my point is, very simple, is that for human beings, we are different in
that
many
regard,
respects, and it takes a long time for us to develop. And that means the social womb, and here's where fathers can help with mothers. And they can't replace a mother.
Yeah.
But I don't know any way you can do that. I mean, you can, but it's a major loss.
Right. Even when it occurs, the loss is felt.
Well, the development inside and then extended outside, that continues.
Well, I mean, and just the loss of a parent. Now that we're talking, we're comparing that to the loss of a child. I'm somebody who's split between parents. My stepfather's now deceased.
Well, that's a loss.
And that left, because at the time, that's now a single parent. But I was much older when it happened, but you can imagine other people in other situations. It's harder to replace that.
There are other cultures
than
who
the
pick
child.
up. Yeah. Say a father dies or disappears or if he gets to work for a living. Then in a decent culture, there are other people who will come in and help.
Tend care.
Tend care in this state, if you got tend care.
And if it stays a viable
and you
means to
have
do
relatives or neighbors who will help, because that's necessary in the social womb to let that brain start growing. And then the major thing about human beings is the incredibly complicated, sophisticated language.
Right.
And that takes 2 years before that. And we've mentioned this before. Once they hit 2, you can see the enormous change in a human being.
Right.
And I say this is when full personhood. I mean, that's a quantum leap into personhood.
I guess we could say that's when you You would not care to argue that's not a person at that point. You're at least saying that's a person to some degree.
What I'm arguing.
And now we're coming at it from that direction.
You want to know my opinion, then I'll give it to you.
Oh. Well, yeah. If we got 20 minutes left. We can.
I'm trying to suggest that we're different from dogs. Dogs develop their certain doghood.
Yeah.
Much quicker.
Yeah. There's a little window afterwards,
yeah, but we've got to develop what personhood means. And what I'm saying is you treat a newborn as a person. And that's crucial to treat them as persons.
Right. I mean, if you didn't.
Because if you don't, they will not become persons.
Right.
That's what the social wound. Well, we've got a caller. Come in.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Hey, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Charles again.
Yeah, Charles.
Good, Charles.
I'm glad you called back. Go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned that a significant portion of all consumptions don't result in a viable gamete forming.
Okay, right.
The last I heard, and I've gone through this many, many times on the internet, is like 25% of all of them naturally terminate.
Yeah, well, that's about what we were at. I think you 16, 15%, and yeah, somewhere around there, yeah.
So,
Third.
the concept of when a human being becomes a human being is a very complicated one.
Very complicated.
And has many, many different answers throughout history. Mm-hmm. Okay. A lot of people wonder, like there was that woman in, I forget where it was, where she was terminally incapacitated, completely brain dead, but was pregnant. Mm-hmm. And they were trying to, they had a fight over whether or not to remove her from life support because she was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And they were defying her stated wishes prior to the accident and her father's stated wishes.
Right, I think that was the Texas one. There was also a Canadian one that made some news, but I think this is referring to a Texas incident. But go ahead.
Well, we need to get into euthanasia sometime later on in another program. But this
wouldn't have been euthanasia. This would have been removing the extreme measures, keeping the heart beating and the lungs functioning.
Right.
And that's all it was doing. She couldn't
keep her going.
She couldn't hear anything.
Yeah.
Because of the extreme brain damage that she had been gotten.
Well, I like this example because earlier we were focused on whether a child is a person. Now we're talking about whether that person, the mother, is a person anymore, whether she's active. Okay. And while I do see this as throwing a cog in our wheel, so to speak, and roughing up the issue a bit, this is a pretty rare thing. But what do you think about that situation, Charles?
I think they should have followed the mother's wishes.
Okay.
It was her body, her decision that she had made prior to the accident.
Right.
Yeah, good.
Okay?
Yeah.
I kind of want a devil's advocate on this a little bit, but I don't want to go too far off the topic.
That's another topic.
Yeah, that's another topic.
And we got to stay on the subject.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Charles.
Oh, well, hang on. Charles got just.
You got another point on the topic, Charles.
For a long time, it was common practice for, at least in the United States, where if the female didn't feel the child kicking, that it wasn't a live, viable fetus, and the woman could get an abortion.
Right. She had a subjective indication that there was something wrong, is what you're saying. Yeah, and that was considered reasonable.
Well, that goes way back to.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, the baby. The term was the baby had not quickened, or the baby.
Quickened is the word.
Yeah.
And that goes back at least to Aristotle, and probably.
Oh yeah.
Aristotle's father was a physician, so he knew a little bit about this, but what you're bringing up is the issue of what specifically are the ingredients that make into personhood.
Right.
It's a detailed question.
Now, would you say kicking in the womb makes you a person?
No.
I guess that's what.
That's not what I.
Right.
Not what
Right. I'm throwing it out there because I thought maybe that would help polarize us on that issue. And yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, kicking isn't enough.
No,
yeah.
But before that, there was no moral problem with getting an abortion.
Yes, correct.
Afterwards.
And that kind of goes back to what you said about this, even after the birth, viability of whether or not this is something to invest in for the community. And early on,
Charles.
Basically, that's the good insight is that the New Testament and that time period was perfectly okay with this type of activity, right, Charles?
Charles.
Yes.
Let's suppose you are a woman for the time being, and you know through scientific research now and the investigation, you know your child is going to be born blind. What's the moral decision to make?
For myself, given our state of medicine now, yes, go ahead and have the child.
And do what then?
So that we would be able to give the child vision in the future.
In the future, how long?
Well, we've only had transplants for how many years now?
I give up.
From deceased people from car accidents and so forth.
Right. On this issue, I think we were trying to use it as an issue to show a severe hindrance to ability to live out. However, on this issue, for those at home probably know a little bit too, there's a lot of advances that have made it to where we have a very strong blind community too that's out there.
If you have the money, you can do all of it, but you can't just simply you're going to do it if you don't have the money.
Right. That's a good point.
If you don't have the resources, if you don't have
exactly. If you don't live in a country that supports these sources, if you don't live in a state, let's say TennCare, just we don't care, then that would be a real problem. And I think then, well, wouldn't you say it at least comes up to the decision of that mother and family whether or not that they want, that they have to, But I agree. I understand what you mean. You would go ahead and do it because you think you could.
Well, if you've got the money, you can do it.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's still at this point we've pushed the legal aside. We don't punish people for that decision.
How many people out there would adopt a blind child, knowing ahead of time when it's going to be born, it's going to be blind? How many people will adopt it?
Well, I guess regarding.
I haven't got a clue.
Yeah. I don't know. That's because I'm sure a lot of people who adopt, these are people who empathize a great deal with these children, and I think they'd probably adopt.
Wait a minute. Do that again.
They empathize a great deal with children.
My wife and I adopted 2 children.
Okay.
I don't think I could handle raising a blind child.
Right. Could you do it? Could you?
I don't think I could.
Good point. If we didn't have the resources, you would have to say, I can't do that. Or if you were someone who just on your own.
I'll go so far as to say this. I think, now this is a conservative argument. I'm using the word conservative in a broader moral sense, not political. You conserve the values you have.
Right.
We have blind people out there already who need to be taken care of.
Right.
Better than they are now. I think it's immoral to bring in a child whom you know would be blind. When we have blind people, we're not taking care of.
Or severely disabled. Or extremely disabled.
Extremely disabled,
I would not, however, impose that on a person.
Right.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, Charles, I think we're going to push on, and that was a really good insight, though. Thanks for, glad you called back.
I agree with Charles. I wouldn't impose. That's not a political thing.
Exactly. We're not talking about what we impose. We're talking about whether or not you can manage to handle it.
Have an option.
And if you can't, then you have the right to make that decision. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Charles.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about is options for people.
And morally, though,
Go.
Let's say I have the stance that I will always have the child, no matter the disability. It might be morally. Now, I'm not talking legally.
Go ahead.
We're not going to punish anyone, but you are you potentially could bring a child into the world with a great deal of problems
that you couldn't help.
And we're talking before it's a person. Again, we've taken that consequence out of it. This is before we have a person. There is no name to it, no history.
It has no conscience and no thoughts.
So,
any conception.
Which is very different than saying, I have the resources available to me to teach this child Braille, to give this child a chance at a community and a life that, according to at least the mass, I mean, we may even have a blind viewer, if you pardon the misnomer there, who's listening, and you had a life where this was not an issue. But we're not talking about blind now. We're talking about some severe handicap, and that decision has to be respected at least.
Yeah, so, we've all known blind people who are dear and contributing members of a community. And of course, Milton went blind, a great writer.
In fact, I'm starting to become a little disabled myself in some regards. I mean, in the future, who knows what holds here?
Yeah, sure.
You know, or we just we're not talking about sending me off to some
I have a dear relative who's very dear to me.
Right.
I mean, very dear, who lost one eye.
Yeah. So just as we wouldn't bring defective, if I found out I had a very high chance to have Down syndrome child or something like that, then maybe I should adopt. Maybe I should, or I could try to have children, and if I find out that it's going to be viable and something I can handle, I have the child. But if I know that it's not, then I don't. And
exactly. Go.
This is just an honest look at what to do there, and these are reasons that, keep in mind, it seems to me that whether you are conservative or liberal on the political issue, or pro-life, pro-choice, it seems like everybody's pro-life in a sense. Pro-choice is pro-life. Pro-life, though, we seem to be making an argument that in some regard might not be pro-life.
Yeah,
because you're condemning someone.
The reason we're doing this is because we know that to have life and personhood, that is a person living his personhood, takes means.
I think what I just said sparked a phone call, but anyways, go ahead. A living person that takes means.
In other words, it takes means and goods, including food and carry. Without those people don't have a chance.
Right, well, and we have a responsibility to see to these things that they're going to happen. We kind of stopped developing into the personhood argument. We've really stayed, and I like that we've stayed on this topic, and I think we got another insight on the phone here.
Yeah, let's see what we got. Go ahead, please, on the phone.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you fine. Could we have a name or nickname for you?
Joan.
Hello, Joan.
I'm calling because I think it might be time to get a woman's perspective.
Yeah,
yes.
I think you're right.
Yes.
My feeling is it should be totally up to the woman after consulting with others. And often the man isn't there or won't stay around.
Right.
But even so, women have totally different ideas women don't all have the same ideas. I have a cousin who was told in her 6th month of pregnancy or so that the x-ray showed her child had hardly any brain and would not live more than a day if she delivered it, and they told her it would be good to get an abortion. And she was totally against abortions. She spent those 3 months carrying the child, to delivery, and delivered him, and he died within a few hours. And other women would have made a different decision. And I think that you're getting into a lot of talk that really doesn't address the question.
Well, let's address the question, and stay with me. What if that baby had lived?
Pardon?
What if the baby had lived? The one that died.
Well, they had said it had no possibility of living because
that's not
right, John. This is a hypothetical.
Wait a minute, let me finish talking.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
If it had lived, in other words, they could have made a mistake. enough so the baby could have lived, but it would have been severely, I'm going to emphasize that, retarded or whatever.
She would have taken care of it.
All right.
Right.
Would that?
I mean, she knew.
Okay. Now, my question is, did she have the means to take care of it?
Well, yes. I mean, to support it.
Okay. Well, that's.
But she wouldn't have had any. She wouldn't have had money enough to pay for its care
then who?
In a medical setting or something year after year. I think that would have drained their resources.
Well, then that's my point, though. That's not just her decision, then.
Well, are you saying it's not just her and her husband's decision?
If they're going to,
the community should also have decided that?
Well, what I'm saying, it's a moral decision. I'm not trying to bring the government in on it. I'm trying to say if they're going to bring a child in knowingly that they cannot support it, and they knowingly are going to have, and that it cannot ever support itself, and that they're going to have to draw in other people's money to just keep it alive, then I'm not so sure that's just a woman's decision.
Yeah, but she was told the child would not survive. So in this particular case,
okay.
Yeah, I think it was her decision. Now, she may have felt that it could have survived.
Okay, now I agree with you. Politically, it should be her decision. I think morally, it would have been a wrong decision. Now, that's my opinion.
Yes,
right.
But yeah, her idea of morality was different.
Different from mine on that.
So, in a way, Joan, I just want to remind, and I think we owe it to the viewers a little bit to remind that we agree with you 100% about the woman's decision, especially legally, because we're trying to protect people. We're trying to protect that decision legally. What we're bringing into question are moral and ethical questions, and I think you're right. I still think she had the right to make the decision, although I'm inclined to believe, as Joe, and I pardon me if I don't read too much into your response, but you almost agreed. You mentioned that she would have financial troubles and that it would be quite difficult. However, as you said, Joan, it was her decision, and she wanted to go through with it.
Right.
So
And
Joan.
yes.
Why did she not consider the option of adoption?
What do you mean?
Well, in other words, she wanted this. What did she want the child or this? In other words, she wanted because it was hers.
She was pregnant with this child, and she was hoping that the doctors. I didn't talk to her personally,
sure.
Because we didn't live near each other. But
right.
She just could not face the idea of an abortion, and of course, other people would have decided differently. And I think that here in the United States, it was decided that it was up to the woman to decide if she wanted an abortion, and
right.
that has been picked at for a long time now, and states keep adding more and more restrictions.
Right. That is yeah.
And I'm with you, and I think you are too.
Yeah, we're all with you on this.
It's better to my approach, and I think you would say. I don't know, Joan. I'd like to hear your opinion. I would like to have kept the state out, but I would have wanted to talk to this woman and get her to make what I would think is a better decision than that, because there are other children already born who need her help and need the help of other people. And to bring a child in that's knowingly going to be an enormous burden on the community and cannot ever take care of itself, I think that's morally wrong. I would want to convince the woman.
Right.
And that it's just because it's her child doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do.
Well, I would think that you should first talk to her doctor, and the doctor would tell you the child was not going to survive.
Right.
So that whole argument wasn't necessary.
Well, in regard to her resources, I believe you, because whether or not she was going to have the child, or I'm sorry, whether or not the child was going to survive and have issues, she clearly had the resources to continue with the birth. So regarding that, I agree. However, you already said she didn't have the resources if it had survived.
No,
and
I said they had the resources if they kept the child at home and raised them.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
But very few middle-class people have the resource of paying for constant care that's done outside of the home, or even inside the home. It's hard enough.
I think we're on the same page there. I do understand. Yeah. And another thing is, I think one thing that you're trying to tell us, and I think it's true, is that you have invested a great deal into this, and it's hard to pull back. It's hard to say I don't want to go through with this, especially the way that we consider the sacred way that human life is. Yeah.
Joan, stay with us, Joan. If you had been personally in that situation, I know it's hard to do. What decision would you have made?
I think I would have. Well, if I thought the doctors were correct and the child had no chance of living anyway, I think I would have found it difficult to go on with the pregnancy. But on the other hand, even at that stage, it's very difficult to have an abortion. So.
Oh, good point. Yeah, because of the legislation that's getting involved at the later terms, right?
No, physically.
Oh, yeah.
Physically.
Right, yeah, I'm sorry, yes, yeah.
It's more difficult. But I think for women who are, going to have a normal birth, but it's a child that they can't afford or they don't want because they know they won't, that there's a lot of difficulty involved in having the father around and all of that. I think in those cases, they should be allowed to make the decision themselves and make it early and not have all kinds of legal restrictions like 72-hour wait periods.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that's where we and a lot of viewers may have a lot of common ground there. That is nonsense getting in the way of a difficult decision.
Treating a woman as if she can't think.
Yeah, it's purposely throwing stuff in the way. I agree with you, Joan. That is. Ooh.
I also think that there are very few women who make the decision lightly.
Exactly.
They've thought it through carefully, whether they decide to have one or not to have one. There's a lot of emotion involved too, I'm sure, but.
Well, now, Joan, you should have been on this program with us.
Yeah.
Or maybe replacing.
Yeah, replace me or something.
or me.
Joan, we are wrapping up. We've got about 80 seconds left in the show. Okay. That has been a very insightful perspective.
Maybe we can do this again when we can have a woman in.
Yeah, we want to have more of these shows.
Yeah, we sure do. Thank you, Joan, very much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks, it's about time to start wrapping up. So get out your pen and paper. You can write our website down there, ctvknox.org. You can write down the number. But this is a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalist of East Tennessee.
And you can see the show each Tuesday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time. And
probably don't need to mention the international time, but
no.
Yeah, that's ctvknox.org.
Yeah.
We'd like to thank all of our viewers, Sam, Jonas for technical support. Forrest is out there with us. We'd also like to thank Charles, Joan. It was Charles and Joan, I believe, that called in.
Yeah.
And we'd like to thank everyone for that patience to put up with a very difficult topic.
Very difficult.
And no doubt we said some things that,
we did the best we could. And want to thank the Rationalists of East Tennessee and the Atheist Society of Knoxville for making this possible and other programs possible. And maybe we'll